Hey guys, this is Justin back with an engineer's perspective, and today I wanted to do a little bit of a random discussion on scissors. The focus of this is going to be on kind of the scissors that you end up, EDCing, being, multi-tool scissors or, the pocket knife scissors in a Swiss Army knife. This is kind of a generic discussion, but, when I first started out using these things, there's some things that I didn't get that I get now, and how they work and what to look for, and I just kind of wanted to talk about it. So yeah, let's start with the good scissors, right? I wanted to demonstrate some things with what is probably widely regarded as some of the best scissors in all of pocket or belt tool kingdom, and that's Victorinox's 91mm scissors right here. These babies are amazing. They're the pinnacle of small scissors. I've trimmed so many hairs with this thing off of my son's and my wife's and my head, especially in the coronavirus times when you couldn't go and get a haircut. These babies were what got the job done. So these are the pinnacle of scissorness. So let's first talk about what makes scissors work. Well, it's pretty obvious. You have two knives, basically what's essentially two knives, and they go past each other, and that cuts stuff because knives are sharp and they cut, right? Let's kind of dig into that deeper though, as to what's really going on. Is scissors don't actually need to have a angled knife's edge to cut, because that's not actually the mechanism with which they do it by. Sometimes you'll hear scissors referred to as shears, for example. And that's because the cutting action isn't so much like a knife where it's causing something, or it's cutting down the middle, there we go, down the middle and causing it to split. Instead, what it's doing is when the two blades cross each other, they kind of shear. Mechanical engineers will really enjoy that term, but shear it between both blades. So they, instead of having an angle, they could be at 90 degrees to each other, and just by the fact that they're catching something in between the two blades, my hands being the blades, it kind of smushes them in between those things and causes it almost to rip apart. But because the tolerances are so tight between the two, it's a cut versus a rip, because it's just right between those two things. So keeping that in mind with scissors, is what that means is it's more important for scissors to meet in the middle than it is for them to physically be sharp. Does that make sense? So how do they accomplish that? Well, the way that a lot of scissor manufacturers will do it is by actually, or one, making them quality so that they do come near each other. But if you look on these Victorinoxes, it's really hard to tell. But do you see how on this this part of the blade, this one that's sticking out in the back, do you see how you can actually see the tip of it poking out right here? Let's see if I can hold it straight and you can see it. You can almost tell that each of these blades is actually curved towards each other. And Victorinox does that so that they don't have to have it be perfectly flat in tolerance right next to each other, is instead they're curved so that when it makes contact, they're always touching and shearing, that shearing action. So those curves are supposed to be there. I remember I had a Super Tinker, is the first one I ever owned, and I cut a zip tie with it. And I looked at it afterwards and I noticed that curve and I said, oh crap, I bent it. But no, that is how it's supposed to be. That is what a big reason why their shearing action is so good. And that's another reason why scissors will often perform much better right towards the pivot versus towards the tip. Because towards the tip, it's easier for the rope that you're cutting to push them away from each other. So they're trying to stay as close to each other, but they're so far away from the pivot that things can bend them away from each other. So like when you've got really crappy scissors, you try to cut something, instead of cutting through it, you know, that piece of string that was in there like that stands straight up and now it's in between the blades. That's because they don't push towards each other with enough force. So them being bent towards each other is a big feature. Another one in that same line of thought, how do I keep the blades right next to each other, is going to be your pivot. So Victorinox does a good job with their pivot. When it's in this position, it's totally tight. Absolutely no play. I do want to point this out, that if I open it up, lots of wiggle. You can hear it. But that's okay, as long as there's no play when it starts cutting. So this is where the play stops. And that's because the blades are bent towards each other once again. So that's how Victorinox solves this problem of play in the pivot, is they just have these two blades forcing against each other, and that keeps the pivot tight. And so you get great cutting action from back to tip. So let's take a look at another good scissor, but one that isn't quite as good, and that's on the Surge, Leatherman Surge here. So you've got good scissors once again, but these guys are not nearly as aggressively bent towards each other. Part of how they overcome that is this is thicker steel, so they don't deflect away from each other as hard when you're cutting something. Once again, you can see when it's open, rattle. When it's closed, there you go. That's where the rattle's gone, right there. Almost no rattle. And the further I go, the less there is. Oh, geez. So you can tell that they're bent towards each other. And another thing you can do is when you actuate scissors is, so if I'm testing out scissors, I'll take them out. The first thing I'll do is see how loose the pivot is, and then I'll do this real slowly. And you can feel the metal blades contacting and rubbing each other. So on the Surge, these are good scissors, but they've been through a lot of stuff and they're not as good as they used to be. So I actually start feeling the two blades contacting each other right there, only at the tip. These aren't nearly as good as they used to be. It used to be quite a bit more than that. But these are still good scissors. They're still pretty tight and there's no wobble even here. So, but they won't cut the tiniest, finest hairs anymore like the Victorinox ones will. I just wanted to take out another few more examples. So this is a Pioneer X, same as the 91mm scissors once again. Lots of wiggle. There's no wiggle there. So that means you got good cutting basically from that point on to there. And I can feel the blades contacting each other starting at that point. And that's why they do such a good job. Another example of really great scissors. Once again, Victorinox, they just make great scissors. Totally tight, totally wobbly. And that's okay, because they've got a good design. And you can feel them contacting pretty much from here all the way to the end. Now let's bring in some more mediocre scissors. This is a Leatherman Wave. Are these awful scissors? No. But are they great scissors? Also no. So plenty of wiggle out there. Wiggle is gone about there. Wiggle's gone about there. I don't really start feeling great contact until about that point there. The problem with these ones, and once again, you can see that these blades are bent towards each other, which is a good thing, like on the Victorinox. If you can kind of see that, how that blade isn't straight. See that? So that's why they do an okay job. You know, a lot better than a lot of other, especially like poor quality multi-tools. I mean, this beats the snot out of those. But in my opinion, they're just a little bit thin in all areas pretty much. And they're just small. They have a hard time with those harder tasks, but they're not as fine as these little scissors are on the small Victorinox tools. You can see how they've just kind of got a little bit beefier tips on there. and it's quite a bit thicker steel. So they're longer than these small ones. So they need that thicker steel to keep them stiff enough. But they're just not as fine as this, but they're not as good as these ones. They're kind of in a weird middle, which just makes them okay. But they still have the aspects of decent scissor design. Bent towards each other, they're tight. Once they're closed, you can feel them touching each other. So, you know, mediocre relative to these much better scissors, but a heck of a lot better than others. And you can tell that Leatherman gave a hoot when they made them. So sharpening scissors. So remember, the whole point of scissors is between the two blades, they have to touch. So that means if you're gonna go in and try to sharpen these scissors, for the love of God, do not touch the flat side in between the two scissors. Because if you do, then they're not gonna touch anymore and you've ruined the scissors. So that means that they've got this ground part of the blade that just makes them cut better. As I mentioned earlier, you don't actually need it, but it makes them cut quite a bit better, is you're just gonna wanna touch that part of the blade, and I'd go very slow and carefully. There's schools, do you wanna grind towards the flat or away from the flat? You know, I've tried both. I think I prefer into the flat a little bit, but because you get a little bit cleaner of an apex, but it's rougher. So honestly, I'm not decided on that yet, I guess. So maybe I should have before I made this video, but I felt like talking about scissors. The thing that's nice with scissors is even if you do develop a burr sharpening on them, it's not the sharpness that cuts, it's that, good shearing action. And if you have a burr towards the inside, you just go clip it a couple times and it'll generally sort out the burr okay. It's not the best, but it works. So, but it's, it's that meeting in the middle, not necessarily the apex sharpness that makes these really great or work well. So yeah, that's that. Just a general discussion on scissors, how they work, what to look for, examples of really good scissors, pretty good scissors, and just okay scissors. There's a lot of really bad scissors out there, but if you buy Victorinox scissors, you're good to go. Don't worry about it. Leathermans have been hit or miss for me. The Surge is probably the best that they do. The Free Series scissors are really good. The Wingman ones are pretty decent. It's been a long time since I've used them. They're micro tools, like the Style and the Micra. They're just okay scissors for me. I don't love them. But anywho, that's that. That's all I want to talk about today. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Bye.